ever stop to think about how much digital communication is happening around us, like all the time?
Hmm?
It's like this constant, invisible river of data flowing through our networks.
Yeah, it really is.
And if you really want to understand what's going on under the hood, you kind of need to learn its language, right? The structure of that data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into network analysis.
Okay.
We're focusing specifically on the fundamental units of that digital river
Yeah.
network packet.
Packets. Right.
And we'll also explore the essential tools, the software that lets us actually see and understand these packets. Gives you a really detailed look at network activity.
So, like, thinking of the network as a puzzle,
Yeah,
and each packet is like a piece of that puzzle.
that's a good way to put it.
And by examining these digital fragments carefully, we can start to see the bigger picture, maybe spot anything unusual,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately, strengthen our defenses.
Precisely. And to help us with this deep dive, we've gathered some really excellent resources.
Good. What do we got?
We've got articles that break down the core concepts, network communication, how the key analysis tools actually work.
Okay, the basics.
And we also have a valuable document from the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
MITRE, ATT&CK. Important stuff.
Very. It highlights how network traffic can be a really crucial source of intelligence about cyber threats. It sort of bridges the gap between the technical details and the strategic security insights.
Okay, cool. So our mission today is pretty clear then. We want to give you, the listener, a solid grasp of network analysis
Right.
by showing you how to dissect these packets using tools like Wireshark and tcpdump.
The big two.
Yeah. And then we'll connect this practical knowledge to the bigger picture, the broader world of cybersecurity, showing how this kind of analysis is vital for understanding and, well, responding to threats.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's get started. Where do we begin? The basics. Packets.
Let's start right there. Packets. At its most fundamental level, a network packet is just the single unit of information that moves across a digital network.
The basic building block.
Exactly. Everything you do online, loading a website, sending a message, uploading a photo, it all involves your devices exchanging countless packets with other computers.
Wow, countless.
It's basically the currency of the internet.
It's amazing how much happens in these tiny digital containers, isn't it? You click a button and bam, all these packets start racing back and forth.
Yeah, it's complex orchestration.
And in cybersecurity, these packets, they become incredibly valuable, right, for figuring out what's actually going on.
Oh, absolutely. When you're investigating security incidents, packets provide essential context. Just by looking at what's inside them, their characteristics, analysts can understand how communication flowed, spot anything unusual, retrace the steps of a potential attack. It's like being able to read the individual words and sentences in a conversation to understand the whole story.
Okay, so what exactly is inside one of these digital packages? We learned a packet has, what, a few key parts?
That's right. The first part is the header.
The header.
You can think of the header as like the address label on a physical piece of mail.
Makes sense.
It contains critical routing information, things like the source and destination IP addresses.
So where it came from, where it's going.
Exactly. The internet addresses of the sender and receiver. Also the packet's length, the type of communication like TCP for reliable connections or UDP for faster ones.
Okay.
And identification numbers to help put fragmented packets back together if they get split up. And what's interesting is that a single packet can actually have multiple headers.
Multiple, like layers.
Kind of like layers, yeah. Layers of addressing information. You might have an Ethernet header for the local network traffic.
Right.
Then an IP header for routing across the wider internet. And maybe even a TCP header on top of that to manage the data flow within that specific connection.
Wow, multiple layers of addressing. Okay, that makes sense given how complex the internet actually is.
It is.
And the sources mention that within the main internet addressing header, the IP header, especially the older version, IPv4.
Right, IPv4.
There are specific fields like version to tell you it's IPv4, time to live, or TTL.
BTL, yeah.
That's like a hop counter, right, to stop packets getting lost in loops.
Exactly. Prevents them bouncing around forever.
And the protocol field, which says what kind of data is actually inside.
What's coming next?
It sounds like each of these little pieces of information could be really significant when you're investigating something.
Absolutely. For example, that TTL value. Sometimes it can give you a hint about the operating system of the computer that sent the packet. Different OEs start with different default TTLs.
Oh, interesting, like a fingerprint.
A little bit, yeah. And the great thing is that tools like Wireshark, they're designed to decode these headers. They
Mhm.
present all this information in an easy-to-understand way.
See, I don't have to be a wizard to read it.
Exactly. You don't have to manually decipher all the bits and bytes. It's like having a translator for network language.
Okay, that's the header, the routing info, the envelope, basically. What about the second part?
The second part is the payload.
A payload.
This is the actual data being transmitted. It can
Yeah.
be the text of an email, the content of a web page, a piece of a file being downloaded, the actual stuff.
The message inside the
You
envelope.
got it. And importantly, this payload is often encrypted,
Right, for security.
especially when sensitive information is being exchanged. It protects it from being read by, well, unauthorized parties.
Encrypted to keep it private, of course.
Mhm.
But even if it's encrypted, I can see how the fact that a certain amount of data is being sent and where it's going, that could still be important.
How so?
Like for spotting things like someone trying to sneak sensitive information out of a network, what our sources called data exfiltration.
Exactly right. The size and destination of that encrypted payload could absolutely be a clue.
So even if you can't read the letter, you see a suspiciously large package going somewhere unusual.
Precisely. Unusual patterns in the size of the payload or the destination of packets with large payloads. These can be indicators of malicious activity.
Okay. And the third component, the footer.
Yeah, the footer wasn't really detailed much in our sources, so we won't get too deep into that today.
Fair enough.
But the header, with its routing and control info, and the payload with the actual data, those are the key parts for network analysis.
Got it. Header is the envelope, payload is the letter inside. Simple enough.
Basically, yeah.
So we understand the basic units of communication now. How do we actually get to see these packets in action? How do we examine them?
Ah, okay. That brings us to the techniques and tools for packet capture and analysis.
Capture. Okay.
The process of actually capturing and inspecting these network packets is often called packet sniffing.
Sniffing. Sounds a bit sneaky.
Well, it can be if not done right.
Mhm.
But when you perform a packet capture, you're essentially creating a digital recording.
A recording.
Yeah, often saved in a file format called PCAP, Piece EP.
PCAP. Okay.
It's a recording of the network traffic that was happening at a specific point in time, like taking a snapshot of the data flowing through the network.
A digital net that catches all the passing data. And these PCAP files, that's the raw data that the analyzers read.
Correct. Network protocol analyzers, software tools, they can open and examine these PCAP files. They let you look at each individual packet in detail.
Okay.
Our sources mention several important packet capture libraries and the file formats they use. On Unix-like systems like Linux and Mac OS, the libcap library is really common.
Libcap.
Yeah. And tools like tcpdump often use it as their underlying engine for capturing packets.
And what about for Windows systems? Is it different?
Historically, WinPCAP was widely used there. It's open source.
Cap. Okay.
But now there's a more modern alternative called NPCAP. It's from the team behind Nmap, the network scanner.
Ah, Nmap. Heard of that.
Yeah, NPCAP is frequently used in Windows now. It offers some improvements, better features, better interaction with the OS.
Good to know.
We also came across PC capping. That's like the next generation PCAP format.
Next gen. What's different?
It's designed for more advanced features like capturing and storing packet data simultaneously, more metadata, stuff like that.
Okay, so different formats, different libraries depending on the system and the tool. Good to be aware of.
Definitely.
Now, I remember a really important point in our materials about the legal side, the ethics of this packet capture.
Absolutely critical, yes.
You can't just sniff anywhere, right?
No way. Intercepting and examining private network communications without explicit authorization is illegal in many places.
Right.
And it raises serious ethical issues. It's essential to only analyze network traffic on networks you own or where you have specific permission to monitor.
Okay, that's super important.
Think of it like listening in on someone's private phone calls.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't do that without their consent.
Right. A very important point to emphasize. So where can someone safely learn and practice these skills then?
Well, a safe and really effective way to get hands-on experience is by analyzing the traffic on your own home network.
Your own Wi-Fi, basically.
Exactly. That allows you to explore the tool, the concepts. Without any legal or ethical worries, you're just observing the communication between your own devices and the internet.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so we can capture these packets legally and ethically on our own networks. Now let's talk about how we actually look at them and make sense of what we see.
Right, the analysis part.
Our sources highlighted two key tools, Wireshark and tcpdump. Let's start with Wireshark. Sounds friendlier.
Ah, it often is for beginners. Wireshark is a very popular, very powerful open-source network protocol analyzer.
Open source, so free to use.
Yep. And what makes it particularly user-friendly is its graphical user interface, the GUI.
Ah, point and click.
Pretty much. This visual approach lets you see and navigate network communications much more intuitively compared to command line tools. It presents the captured data in a structured, readable format.
A visual way to explore that invisible world of packets. I like that. But, when you capture network traffic, you can end up with just a huge amount of data.
Oh yeah, easily thousands, even millions of packets in a short time.
So how do you even begin to find what you're looking for in all that noise?
Yeah, that's the challenge. And this is where filtering becomes absolutely crucial.
Filtering. Okay.
Wireshark has a very powerful display filter system. These filters let you specify criteria.
Like search terms.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And Wireshark will then only show you the packets that match those criteria. It helps you sift through the mountain of data and focus on the specific traffic you're interested in for your investigation.
How do you use them?
There's a filter toolbar, usually right at the top of the Wireshark window. You just type your filter in there. For example, if you're interested in DNS traffic.
DNS, that's the phone book of the internet, right?
Right.
Translates names to addresses.
Exactly. You can simply type DNS in that filter bar, hit enter, and bam, Wireshark only displays packets using the DNS protocol.
That sounds incredibly useful. Just type the protocol name. What other kinds of filters can you apply?
So the possibilities are quite broad. As we said, you can filter by protocol. Besides DNS, common ones are like HTTP for web traffic, TCP/UDP.
Okay.
You can also filter based on IP addresses.
Ah, so find traffic from a specific computer.
Exactly. Using the syntax ip.src, and then the IP address shows packets from that address.
ip.src.
And ep.sest shows packets going to that address.
ip.srcsc.
Okay.
So ep.src equals 10.year ode 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 to 7 drawing to see traffic from an internal device. Or ip.dst equals 4.4.4.4 to see traffic going to a specific public DNS server.
It's like searching your email inbox for messages from a specific sender or to a specific recipient.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
That's great for tracking communication. What other filtering options did the sources mention?
You can also filter by MA's address. That's the hardware address of a network card.
Right, the physical address.
You use f.addr followed by the MAC address. That's useful sometimes on a local network.
And port filtering is essential, really essential for isolating traffic for specific applications or services.
Ports, like doors for different applications.
Kind of, yeah. Different services listen on different port numbers. For example, DNS typically uses UDP port 53.
UDP 53.
So a filter like udp.port equals 53 will show you only DNS traffic using UDP. Web traffic often uses TCP port 80 for unencrypted HTTP, or TCP port 443 for encrypted HTTPS.
Oh, 443. See that one a lot.
Yeah. Email might use TCP port 25 for sending. Filtering by port lets you focus on the communication related to a particular application.
Wow. So many ways to really dig down into the data and find just what you need. That's powerful.
It really is.
And Wireshark has this feature called follow streams that sounds particularly helpful for understanding conversations.
Oh yeah, follow streams is extremely valuable. It reconstructs the entire flow of data within a specific communication session.
How does that work?
Well, you select a packet from a TCP or UDP stream, right-click, and choose Follow. Wireshark then gathers all the packets belonging to that specific conversation and puts them together in order in a single, easy-to-read window. It shows you the sequence of data transmitted back and forth.
So you see the whole dialogue.
Exactly. It's incredibly useful for understanding the complete exchange in protocols like HTTP. You can see the web request your browser sent, and then the server's response, like the HTML code.
Ah, okay. Like reading a transcript of the network conversation.
That's exactly what it's like. Our sources even had an image showing an HTTP stream, the GET requests and the HTML coming back.
Being able to piece together the whole back and forth like that would definitely make analyzing application stuff much simpler.
Absolutely.
The sources also mentioned that Wireshark uses color coding in its main packet list. What's that about?
Yeah, the coloring. That's a fantastic visual aid. Wireshark uses different background colors for rows in the packet list to represent different types of network traffic based on the protocol.
So you can spot patterns quickly?
Exactly. It allows you to quickly identify patterns and the kinds of communication happening, especially in a busy capture. For instance, DNS traffic might be shown in light blue by default.
Okay.
While TCP and HTTP traffic could be green, you can even customize these coloring rules to highlight the traffic that's most important for your specific investigation.
Custom colors. Nice. Okay, to really illustrate how this works in practice, our sources walked through a scenario, right? An analyst investigating traffic using a sample PCAP file.
Yeah, a practical example.
Can you walk us through some of those steps? How would that actually look?
Certainly. So the first step is simply opening the PCAP file in Wireshark.
Yeah.
Usually just double-clicking the file works.
Okay, load the data.
Once it's open, you'll typically see 3 main panes or areas in the Wireshark window.
3 panes.
At the top, that's the packet list. It gives you a one-line summary of each captured packet: number, time, source, destination protocol, basic info.
The overview.
Right. In the middle, that's the packet details pane. This shows you a detailed hierarchical breakdown of the currently selected packet's headers. You can expand each layer: Ethernet, IP, TCP, application data.
So you can drill down into the specifics.
Exactly. See all the individual fields within those headers. And at the bottom is the packet bytes pane. That shows the raw data of the packet in hexadecimal and ASCII formats.
The actual bits and bytes. Probably less used unless you're really digging deep.
Often, yeah. The details pane is usually where you spend most of your time.
And as we mentioned, the coloring in that top packet list gives you a quick visual overview, right? Like seeing lots of light blue for DNS, the maybe green for the web requests.
Precisely. The example also mentions seeing things like echo ping request in the info column of the packet list.
Ah, so even a simple ping shows up.
Yep, every packet gets captured. Now, when you select the specific packet in that top list, you look at the packet details in the middle pane. You can then expand the different sections, like expanding the frame section, give you general info about the packet itself, its length on the wire when it arrived.
Okay.
The Ethernet 2 section shows the source and destination ML addresses, the local hardware addresses involved.
Right, for the local network segment.
And the Internet Protocol version 4 section, that's where you see the source and destination IP addresses, plus other IP header info like TTL, and the protocol number for what's inside, like TCP or UDP.
And this detailed breakdown lets you pinpoint specific pieces of info, like the time to live value we talked about, the total frame length, the header length, the destination IP address, all highlighted in the example.
Exactly. You just click to expand the relevant section and find the field you need.
And the walkthrough also showed applying that UDP.port equals 53 filter to isolate DNS traffic.
Yes. Once that filter is applied, you only see the DNS packets. Then, by clicking on one and looking at the details, pane, specifically the DNS section, the analyst could see the actual DNS queries being made. The example showed a query for opensource.google.com.
Okay.
And then you'd see the corresponding DNS answers, the packets coming back from the DNS server, providing the IP addresses associated with that name.
That's incredibly useful for seeing where a computer is trying to connect online.
Absolutely fundamental for tracking activity.
The example also showed filtering for TCP packets that contain specific text using TCP contains curl. What's that about?
Yeah, that's another powerful filter type. TCP contains followed by a string, in quotes.
Like curl.
Right. It searches the payload data of TCP packets for that specific string. Curl is a common command line tool for making web requests, often used by scripts or sometimes by attackers.
Okay.
So that filter helps you find TCP traffic that might involve the use of that tool, or maybe other specific keywords relevant to an investigation, like commands or file names.
So Wireshark offers this fantastic visual interactive way to explore packet data. Very powerful.
Immensely powerful, and the GUI makes it quite accessible.
But our sources also highlighted another key tool, a command line one this time, tcpdump.
That's right, tcpdump. It's also very powerful, maybe even more flexible in some ways, but it's all text-based.
No GUI.
No GUI. It's a command line packet analyzer, often used on systems where you don't have a graphical interface like remote servers or maybe in automated scripts.
Okay.
tcpdump relies on that same libcap library we mentioned earlier, or its equivalents like npcap on Windows, to actually capture the network packets.
So, being command line, the approach to filtering and analysis must be different from Wireshark's visual clicks.
It is. With tcpdump, you specify your filtering criteria directly as arguments or options right there in the command you type into the terminal.
Okay.
One really important option our sources emphasized is the -n flag.
-n, what does that do?
Okay, so by default, tcpdump tries to do name resolution. It tries to convert IP addresses into host names.
like turning 8.8.8.8 into google-public-dnsa.google.com.
Exactly. And it also tries to convert port numbers into service names, like port 80 to HTTP.
Okay. And why is disabling that with DDN generally a good idea?
Couple of main reasons.
Graph.
First, tcpdump's name resolution isn't always accurate. It might guess wrong, especially if ports are used for non-standard things.
Ah, okay. Could be misleading.
Could be. Second, and maybe more importantly in investigations, performing name resolution means tcpdump has to send out reverse DNS queries.
To ask who owns this IP address.
Right. And if you're investigating potentially malicious activity, setting those lookup requests for the attacker's IP addresses could inadvertently tip them off. They might see those queries hitting their DNS server.
Oh, you could alert the bad guys you're looking at them. Not good.
Not good at all. So using tfen disables that host name resolution. It just shows you the IP address.
Okay.
There's also a N flag, double N, which disables both host name and port resolution. That gives you just the raw IP addresses and port numbers, often the safest bet.
And DN or Billy N. Got it. It's about accuracy and operational security, really.
Exactly. Maintain a lower profile during analysis.
The sources also gave an example tcpdump command using asr-vn. Can you break those down?
Sure. ASHR tells tcpdump to read packets from a specified PCAP file.
Okay, so analyze a saved capture, not live traffic.
Right. Instead of capturing live, you point it at a file like pcpdump ashar mycapture.pcap.
Got it.
ASHV stands for verbose. It increases the amount of detail tcpdump shows for each packet. You could even use ASHVV or ASHVVV for more verbosity.
More details. And a cherry, we just covered disable name resolution.
Correct. So the command like tcpdump ashar mycapture.tcap-vn would read that file, show more detailed output per packet, and stick to IP addresses instead of host names.
Okay. And the output itself, the text that tcpdump prints, what does that typically show? The image had an example.
Yeah, the output typically shows, for each packet, a precise timestamp.
When it was captured.
The source IP and source port, the destination IP and destination port.
The core addressing info.
And then protocol-specific details. For TCP, for instance, it shows things like PCP flags, SYN, ACK, FIN, RST flags indicating connection state, sequence numbers, acknowledgement numbers, window size, maybe some options.
So similar info to Wireshark, but purely text-based.
Exactly. It's a text representation of the same fundamental packet data. It might seem less intuitive at first than Wireshark's GUI.
Definitely looks denser.
But tcpdump is incredibly powerful and flexible, especially once you get comfortable with its command line syntax and its own rich filtering language, which is actually the basis for Wireshark's capture filters, by the way. It's a real workhorse for network admins and security pros.
Okay, so two powerful tools. Wireshark for visual analysis, tcpdump for command line power and scripting.
That's a good summary.
All right. So we've covered the basics of packets and the main tools to examine them. Now, let's connect this technical understanding to the bigger picture cybersecurity threat intelligence, specifically looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Right, making the connection. The MITRE ATT&CK framework, as you know, is this huge, widely respected knowledge base. It catalogs the tactics and techniques adversaries use in real-world attacks.
Based on actual observation.
Exactly. And our sources highlighted how network traffic, which ATT&CK identifies as data source DS0029.
DS00029.
Right, plays a really critical role in understanding and detecting malicious activity mapped to that framework. This network data can be analyzed in different forms. It might be summarized, like in NetFlow logs, which give high-level session details.
Like who talked to whom, for how long, how much data.
Kind of, yeah. Or it can be the raw full packet capture, the PCK files we've been mostly talking about.
And by analyzing this network traffic, whether NetFlow or PCKP, we can start to identify specific attacker tactics and techniques documented in ATT&CK.
Precisely. The sources give some really good examples of this.
Yeah, let's go through some. What about exfiltration? Stealing data.
Okay, exfiltration. Attackers trying to get data out. By analyzing network traffic, you look for unusual patterns in data leaving your network.
Like what kind of patterns?
Large volumes of data going to unexpected places. Maybe unusual protocols being used for outbound transfers. You'd monitor the total bytes sent. Maybe look at specific ports, common file transfer ports like 21 FTP or 22 SSH SFTP, web ports 804433, or even weird stuff like tunneling data over DNS on port 53.
Using DNS to sneak data out. Clever.
Happens all the time. You'd also look at the destinations. Is lots of data suddenly going to cloud storage, code repositories like GitHub, anonymous paste bin sites? That could be a huge red flag.
So the key is looking for anomalous outbound data flow.
Exactly. what doesn't fit the baseline.
Okay. What about command and control, or C2? Attackers talking to their malware inside the network.
Right, C2. Network traffic analysis is huge here. You look for connections going out to known malicious or suspicious IP addresses or domains. Threat intelligence feeds help here.
Checking against blacklists.
Yep. Also look for unusual patterns in the traffic itself. Weird user agent strings and HTTP requests. The presence of tools like curl being used for beaconing, like we saw in the Wireshark filter example.
Ah, right. TCP contains curl.
That could indicate a C2 channel. Basically, you're identifying unusual communication patterns with external or suspicious entities.
Got it. And what about attackers moving inside the network? Lateral movement.
Good question. For lateral movement, you shift focus to analyzing traffic within your internal network. What looks suspicious inside?
Like what?
Maybe excessive SMB traffic on port 445, that's Windows file sharing.
Yeah.
Is one workstation suddenly scanning others on 445?
Hmm.
Or unusual RPC activity on port 135? Connections using SSH port 22 or RDP port 5389 between internal systems that don't normally talk that way, especially between workstations or from a workstation to a server unexpectedly.
So peer-to-peer RDP might be weird.
Could be, yeah. Or seeing connections using administrative shares like ADMIN or CTOCL. These could all suggest an attacker is trying to spread.
So here, the key is looking for uncharacteristic internal communication patterns, especially involving admin or file sharing protocols.
You nailed it.
It's fascinating how these low-level packet details really can reveal these high-level attack strategies. The sources listed several other ATT and CK techniques too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Loads of them. For example, you might spot exploitation attempts by looking for traffic patterns, matching known exploits,
Yeah.
maybe malformed requests, or specific strings like SQL injection attempts in web traffic.
Okay.
Active scanning, where attackers probe for openings, often shows up as lots of connection attempts to various ports or hosts from one source. Very noisy,
Easy to spot, hopefully.
sometimes. Attackers might try data obfuscation, hiding their traffic. Detecting that might involve looking for unusually encoded data or non-standard protocols.
Tricky.
Can be. Even things like indicator removal attackers trying to cover their tracks by clearing logs might be preceded by unusual network traffic related to accessing those log systems remotely.
Ah.
If they're bringing tools into the network, ingress tool transfer, you might see an internal client sending way more data out than it's receiving during a session with an external server, indicating an upload.
Weird directionality.
Right. Connections to external remote services like SSH or RDP, originating from untrusted sources, big red flag. Scheduled transfers of data going out at regular intervals to suspicious places, also bad.
Like clockwork exfil.
Could be. Network connections initiated by weird system binaries like cmstp.exe. Worth investigating.
No.
And then there are techniques like protocol tunneling, proxying, domain fronting, all designed to hide C2 traffic, often by making it look like legitimate web traffic. Network analysis is key to spotting the subtle anomalies there.
Wow.
Even unexpected traffic duplication on the network could indicate something malicious, like sniffing. The common thread for all of these is identifying network communication patterns that deviate from your normal baseline and align with known attacker behaviors documented in ATT and CK.
It really is like network traffic becomes this rich source of evidence for so many different malicious activities.
It truly is.
And our ability to analyze these packets using Wireshark, using tcpdump, directly empowers us to actually detect these threats in the real world.
Precisely. Understanding the language of packets, knowing how to dissect them, it gives you this incredibly powerful lens to observe and understand what adversaries are doing.
The sources also briefly mentioned campaigns within MITRE AT and CK. How does that fit in? Help us understand threat actors.
Right, campaigns. So MITRE AT and CK acknowledges that threat groups aren't static, right? Their tools change, their techniques evolve, their targets shift.
They adapt.
Exactly. A campaign in ATT and CK is basically a way to group intrusion activities that happen over a specific period and seem linked, maybe same objectives, same tools, attributed to the same actor during that time.
So it's like a snapshot of a threat actor's activity for a certain time frame.
Pretty much. It helps you look at a more focused, time-bound set of actions rather than just a giant list of everything a group has ever done. This gives a potentially more accurate picture of how that threat actor is currently operating or was operating during that campaign window.
So instead of just saying APTX does A, B, and C, you might look at campaign cobalt by APTX in 2023 and see they were heavily focused on technique D&E during that specific period.
Exactly. It provides a more nuanced, actionable understanding of adversary behavior. It lets security teams focus defenses and intelligence gathering on the most current, relevant TTPs for specific active threats.
That makes a lot of sense. Focus on the here and now or the recent past for specific campaign.
Okay.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. Seriously, we've gone from the absolute basics, the packet,
The building block.
all the way up to seeing how analyzing these packets connects directly to understanding sophisticated threat behaviors in frameworks like MITR, ATT, and CK.
And it's worth remembering, network analysis is a skill. It develops over time.
Practice makes perfect.
Definitely. The more you practice with Wireshark, with tcpdump, the more familiar you get with different protocols, different packet structures, the better you'll become at actually deciphering the stories hidden in that traffic.
And it's really amazing to see that direct line, isn't it, between these seemingly tiny technical details in packet headers and payloads, and the big picture, the strategic understanding of cyber threats.
Yeah.
Being able to translate those bits and bytes into meaningful intelligence about what an attacker might be doing, that's a genuinely powerful capability.
Indeed it is. So as you reflect on this deep dive, into the language of networks, it brings us to a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Now that you have this glimpse into the often unseen world of network communication, what stories might the packets on your own network be telling?
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. We definitely encourage you to explore Wireshark, tcpdump further, dig into the IDR, ATT, and CK framework, and maybe start uncovering some of those narratives yourself.